You got
One of
some?
my peeps asked a question, and so this is
Yeah.
one of my Patreon supporters.
Yeah, I got it
I
in the.
forwarded it on to you.
Yep. This is Julia, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm going to read her question.
All right.
Ready? I have a friend.
You don't sound like a Julia.
You're going to have to use your imagination.
All right.
All right. I have a friend with 12 acres in the San Francisco Bay Area on the edge of Castro Valley, as if I know what that is. So getting into the Oakland hills. I've heard of Oakland before. Their land is sloped, not terribly steep, and mostly in pasture. He's got some sheep, some poultry, some established trees, mostly gathered together at the low point of the property. Whenever I try to talk to him about water retention, swales and berms for his fruit trees, keyline ploughing, he says he can't do anything because he has a hard layer 2 feet down or less, and retaining water will just lead to landslides. I know landslides are a thing in that area, but is it true there's nothing he can do?
Bravo. Well read.
Thank you.
Great question.
More.
It's a great question, and it's asked a lot, especially during PDCs, because people are like, "Won't water go under and like push everything off the hill?"
So I think that the concern is very real. I want to point out that I want to point at my property for a moment. Now I've got two. I've got the lab, which is a couple hundred acres with incredibly deep soil, and then very close by is base camp, which is like a 20-acre rock, and so it's just one giant rock, which is part of. It's had this whole mountain range named after it. You might have heard of it, called the Rocky Mountains. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Never.
So it's made out of rock. That's why they call it the Rocky Mountains. So the thing is like I go out with a shovel and I'm like, I'm going to plant a seed, and then it goes bing, bing. The thing is there's no soil. I'm looking right at that rock, that giant rock. I'm looking at that rock. And so then one might say that that whatever soil used to be here has already slid off and gone away. Kind of like what this person is worried about having happen. However, I also want to point out that we did something. Because we're in the Rocky Mountains, this particular property is kind of steep. It's got cliffs and steepy things all over it. We have a thing we call the volcano, even though it's not really a volcano, but it's like this little mountain. So basically my 20-acre plot might be, more like 30 acres just because of all of the steepness is made more acres, including the volcano. It's like if there wouldn't be much there if the volcano was flat instead, but because there's a steep volcano in the middle of the property, it's kind of like
more property.
I have more. It's like I have more property. I buy 20 acres, get 10 acres free, kind of a thing. So,
this is why vertical gardening is so popular.
So, well, yeah, you kind of, it's like your only option, sort of. Yeah. But it's kind of like we wanted to go up there more. And so at first, I walked up there a bunch of different times, and it made me breathe hard.
It's good.
And I got to thinking, like, hey, it'd be convenient as if there's a way to kind of drive up there or whatever. And there's also, so I happen to have a 14-ton excavator with a rock bucket on it. And that means a bucket that's like, the steel is super thick. It's really crappy at trying to dig through clay and certain soils, but it's awesome at beating the crap out of rocks. And so we took it up there to beat the crap out of the rocks, and we beat a road up there all the way to the top of the caldera. And so the moral of the story is that this clay, is it, that's underneath the dirt, is probably softer than my rocks.
Yeah.
And then if you so what I did is as I'm building this road, I rip rocks out from one point and I drop them slightly downhill, and that makes for a flat spot, which I then make into a snaky shape that slowly, gently goes up the hill, goes up to up a mountain of sorts, and then we can drive up there if we wanna, and which we have. And if you walk up there, you don't you probably breathe about as hard, but it's like you can pace yourself. We actually have a lot of lovely benches up there now too, so you can kind of sit, take it easy. Oh. You'll see soon, Josiah. You'll be here, and I'll point at it and say, "Hey, go up there and fetch me a rock," right?
Yeah.
So, stuff like that.
Maybe a purple person can come with me. We could sit on the bench together.
Yeah. Somebody was saying that Sepp Holzer's a hippie, and so one time I asked Sepp Holzer, I said, "Are you a hippie?" And his answer was, "Are you?" And Jack once asked me that if I'm a hippie. Yeah. And I had to think about it a while, and I came back with this response, and I said, you know what? I think I am a hippie, and the reason is that that's where all the most beautiful women are. The most beautiful women to me, are hippies. Therefore, I must be a hippie.
Or you prey on the hippie.
I don't think that's...
No. That was a poor choice of wording.
Sepp Holzer never committed one way or the other on this topic. So, but I have no problem at all committing. So,
I was raised by hippies, so therefore I know better. No, I'm kidding. I got no problem with hippies as long as they don't try and make laws that affect me. As long as they keep the laws away from me, I'm happy. Brian says, I mean, just the hair and beard grooming is taxing for Paul. Smiley face.
I think I woke up the other morning, and my policy is that whenever I wake up in the morning and my beard is all smashed off the one side, that's when I know it's time to trim my beard. When I have like bedhead on my beard,
yeah,
I know it's time to trim.
Oh, I think it's just time to start sleeping on the other side. So it pushes the other way.
And so I had that problem, but it's like with the water not running, I kind of thought I would wait. So
yeah.
This is going to go away really soon. This is about as bushy as I'll let it get.
How far down will you trim it?
However far the buzzy trimmers.
I have buzzy trimmers with one setting. That's how far.
It's got a little thing you clip on it, and then you just leave it on there, and that's what it is. I don't know. I don't hold a ruler up to it. I don't care.
I do all the there's like number 1, number 2, number 3. My trimming and maintenance is very low. I do it by the season. So it's spring, so I have trimmed it a little. Oh. And then when summer comes, I'll probably be bald and just have kind of a beard going. In winter, I'm a hairy mess.
For me, it seems like something I do every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And even then, I kind of wonder, am I really this vain that I'm going to, trim it? And it turns out that after a while, I do get kind of annoyed, and so I trim it. So. But all right, so now, rather than talk about grooming, let's talk about Julia's question.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I forgot. How did we get on that? Anyway.
The whole thing about stuff sliding down the hill to visit the neighbors, I think that's a valid concern, an important thing to embrace and be worried about. And so then part of my thinking is like, what if you planted a bunch of taprooted trees around? Wouldn't that kind of anchor a lot of that into the hillside?
Yes. My first thoughts were taprooting plants to get into that clay, And then my second thought was, what would be the right sequence to, because a lot of people want to do the earthworks first so that they're not smashing all the plants that they have planted. And so, but then the concern is that, okay, so I do the earthworks, I plant my stuff, and then rain comes and stuff's not established yet and it still washes away. So another thought is that how deep into this clay are you going? Like you were saying with the rock, at least with clay, you can actually go into the clay. And so if that water is going into a swale or a keyline, and it's deep enough that it hits the clay and doesn't topple over or topple into the topsoil, well, now you have a ditch, essentially. Because the whole point in a swale is to get water to go into that topsoil because you want to retain water in the topsoil. If you do it into clay, well, then you've just created a ditch because the water can't get through the clay. But that's where the taprooting plants come into hand, so that you can start building topsoil into the clay or turning that clay into topsoil. And sorry for taking your wind there, Paul. Go.
So my first thought is to plant lots of taprooted plants, especially trees. But then I kind of thought, depending on the amount of slope that there is, the taproot might actually not go straight down, but it might just go downhill, in which case it didn't really buy you much of what you're looking for. And then on top of that, there's the whole thing of like, before you start planting a bunch of trees, do your earthworks first. And so it's like, okay, so what is the solution? And I would think, because Sepp Holzer has some of that problem too. And then one of the videos, there was a lot of concern about this very thing happening, and that's why he makes terraces. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like you end up creating some steeper spots, but then you also end up making some pretty broad terraces. So then, in fact, it's like the steeper spots are just right next to the terrace that you've made. And then everything between the terraces is exactly the same as what it was before. And then I think what he does is he goes through, and the first thing he does is he makes terraces that are pretty far apart. And then once things get really well established on those terraces, then you might go through and make another terrace between two terraces.
So for those that don't know what terraces are, a simple explanation I give is steps. Just picture steps going down a mountain or a hill. That's about as simple as you can get with terraces.
Sure. Does this program have the ability to draw on it? Can we draw?
Yeah, go to share screen. Click share screen and then click whiteboard.
Ooh.
We'll draw you stairs.
Share screen. And then, okay, I clicked on share screen and I don't...
You should see whiteboard.
I don't see whiteboard. I see on my browser windows.
Okay.
All right. I'm watching, it says you're viewing Josiah Wallingford's screen.
Yeah, you should be seeing something.
All right, there, you scribbled. I see you scribbling.
Yeah. So if you don't have that, let me make you host, because that might be why. Make co-host. Okay. All right, now I'll stop sharing. Now go to screen share and see if you have whiteboard.
I see a list of, I see desktop 1, desktop 2, and I see my software that I've loaded up. No.
Panelist.
No.
More. Okay, I will make you the host and see what happens.
It says you are the host now.
Yeah, you're in total control. So don't mess anything up. If you
don't tell me what to do.
So now close screen share if you've got it open, and then open it again and see if it gives you whiteboard. Hey, what's happening? Oh, now you're sharing all kinds of stuff. You're sharing your whole desktop so we could see everything you were looking at. I still have whiteboard.
All right. Why don't you draw for people
All right.
what a terrace looks like? Because I think the people watching this know what a terrace looks like, and you're the dude that's worried about it anyway.
Well, I just want to appease all or help all.
I can draw on your screen. I can't, apparently.
Oh, wait. Remote control. Give mouse keyboard control to Paul Wheaton. There you go. Hey.
All right. Can I change the color now?
Yeah. Just click format on up there where it's red.
Options.
You were just on it.
Yeah. All right. Never mind. Here's the basic idea. You're going to cut into the hillside, probably not that steep. And then you're going to, take that material that you just cut out and you're going to flop it over here.
Yeah.
So you'll notice over here, it's the exact same slope as before. And up here, it's the exact same slope as before. Whereas here, you've got a flat spot. So if this decides to like slide off, it'll probably stop right about here on this terrace as it slides off. Blorp. Now, right in here, you're going to be able to, you're deep into your clay now. You've kind of cut a big part in there. So basically what you've done is that now there's risk here with this stuff. This stuff tends to want to go downhill more. So when it gets sloppy wet, it might want to push everything else down the hill. So you want to start planting right in here, like right away with all your, heavy duty super seed taprooty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that eventually you're going to plant some taprooty stuff over here too. And it's going to go deep into this clay. And in fact, most of the stuff that you plant anywhere on this terrace is going to get a good chance to go straight down into the clay and help break it up and get things going there. Although most of the time, taprooty stuff doesn't like to go into like that intensive clay. It tends to like hang a hard left and just, stay above that at once. But all right. The key is that right here, you've exposed your subsoil. And whatever you grow in there is going straight into the clay, and that's its only choice. And then once it starts doing that, everything starts to have an anchor into the clay to keep it from sliding down the hill. That's my point. So I would say that first of all, she mentions keyline plowing, and I'm kind of thinking like, really? Keyline? So it must not be too terribly steep then, if they're talking about keyline.
He said it wasn't terribly steep, no.
Yeah. So if a tractor can go up there and not roll over, then it must be much shallower than what I just drew, is my guess.
And yes, and what they're getting, but you can still do terraces on pretty low grades. So you could still do terraces. They're just wider terraces, the shallower the area. I want to put a little more into this. So I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to go with brown and a line, something like that. And then I probably can't do that. Clear. Okay. Draw freehand, brown, just like Paul did. There's your topsoil. And then I'm going to put a red for clay. Okay. So there's your clay on the slope, and then there's your topsoil. So your grass or whatever you got, is on top of the topsoil. So what Paul is saying is that you're cutting, and I'll use a different cutting. We'll do red. We'll stick with red. So when you're cutting, you're cutting here and then across. Okay, so your topsoil is this is all going away, right? Damn it! I can't.
Oh, Josiah.
It erases the whole thing. Shoot. I was hoping. Okay, so I would just be erasing this section right here, so you don't see this little red and the topsoil in this L. Okay, because that all goes away, and now you're just exposed here.
Well, it does. It goes downhill. It goes to the downhill side.
It goes away from this area, and then it goes here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And creating your steps. So I was trying to make it more visually appealing, but failed due to technical difficulties. I need a whiteboard.
Well, there's probably some kind of drawing software you can use, and you know, something that you're really used to, and you can draw much better at. Right.
Anyway,
the question is being able to do earthworks, right? I mean, this is a particular scenario, and it's like, well, the guy doesn't want to do earthworks because, you know, it could all slide down the hill, and I kind of feel like, well, then don't do the whole thing. Just do a part. Just do a couple of spots. And
yeah.
I kind of feel like with a lot of the systems, I mean, step one, learn about earthworks, which seems, I mean, I'm amazed when I start talking about earthworks to people how there's so much of this that they don't know. And so learn about earthworks. Then it's kind of like, okay, today we're going to work out an acre. So this guy's got 12 acres. Was that right? Yeah, 12 acres. So we're going to make a plan for an acre. And maybe it'll take us a year, maybe 2 years to get this acre to really sing for us. But we're going to start off renting a small excavator to come up here and, you know, do some things. We're going to put in a terrace. Now, you mentioned swales. And it's kind of like you've been listening to Jeff Lawton. And listening to Jeff Lawton's always a good idea, but the guy is just bonkers about swales. And so I think that we're talking about a northern climate, a cooler climate, and I think that it's okay to have like 10% in swales, but the rest of it should be not swales. And still we want to add texture to the landscape. And so I think that a terrace is going to be good. I like the idea of adding hugelkultur, and whether or not you can do hugelkultur is going to depend on like what materials you have on hand and things like that. But the important part is, I think digging a terrace and you're getting down to the clay layer and well into that clay layer, and you're embracing that clay layer, that's a big part of it. And it's like now you're hooked into it. You got it. Now, of course, there's comedy to be had with clay. When it rains, you might want to make sure that your terrace slopes a little bit to the downhill, just so that when the water comes, you're not making a mud puddle.
5 degrees.
Something slight.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you don't want to have mud puddles.
Yeah.
Now it's possible you might want to make a pond at some point, and then really dig into that hillside to make a pond. At least that pond's going to seal easy because of all the clay. But that would add some texture to the landscape. That would be pretty cool. But now you're going to make a dam, and you're probably going to make sure that the dam has a key. And
you need a big terrace.
Yeah. So, you know, there's some things to design. But the key is that out of all of this stuff, embrace your fear about this. You know, mitigate those concerns. Because the problems and the risks are significant. So be thinking about when is your wet season, and then start work shortly after the wet season. Get a lot of stuff to grow in there, and then plus at the same time, I think I should qualify this. Like, we don't know exactly how steep this is. I would kind of like want to know how steep it is before jumping in on something like this myself. And I'm not there. I don't really know. So
it just says slope, not terribly steep. So I'm guessing it's still pretty steep. Now Julia said she did mention swales and berms and keylines. So, another point that Paul just made, or important point, is the wet seasons, because in that area you get tremendous dry seasons followed by tremendous wet seasons, and that's why a lot of the reason why landslides are such an issue there. The other big reason landslides are such a big issue is because a lot of the foliage uphill is being taken away to build houses and roads and stuff. So, anyway, those are the points I have. Yeah, I think you're spot on with some terraces. As far as ponds go, I'm a little hesitant. Well, first of all, ponds on slope, the more slope there is, the more expensive and risky ponds become. And the more difficult they become too, and which is why they're more expensive to build. So just something to keep in mind.
I think I would start with adding in a lot of terraces, and then in some spots you might have a wider patch of terrace than others, and that might be a spot for some kind of pond, especially since as you dug into that hillside, you started to expose a fair bit of clay. Now, of course, the problem is that, like, if you have a mud puddle that forms on a dam to a pond, then that's when the whole dam and pond might go downhill to visit neighbors. So you've got to design your dam in such a way that it has a crown on top, so that way water will flow off of it and keep the dam dry. Because if you don't do that, once water gets into the dam, then it becomes scary.
One thing that is nice about the description of the land here is that clay does play very nicely with ponds. So the more clay you have, the easier ponds it becomes. The other thing you had mentioned was the 1 acre kind of deal. So when doing 1 acre out of 12. So my suggestion is when you have a large piece of property or any large area that you're working with, that you do a whole property design, which is a general design, a base understanding of what kind of earthworks would work where, things like that. So you're designing the whole property that way. And then you're segmenting, you take that design and build little chunks, like 1 acre chunks, and design intensively those 1 acres and work on them as you go, if you're going to do it that way. Or that's how I prefer.
Oh yeah. You do an acre. Don't do any more than an acre each year generally. But you're going to go out and you're going to, rather than like gardening traditionally, where you're like, I want to get out the rototiller and I want to go till this, 1/4 acre patch where I'm going to grow all my stuff in rows. Rather than doing that, your work is going to be on like building up a 1/4 acre each year, or maybe more, depending on a variety of things. And it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do with this 1/4 acre or 1/2 acre or acre? And so instead of doing the whole property, then you're going to do just some of it.
Yeah, you're doing the intensive design on the smaller part, the sections.
Yeah.
And the smaller an area of design is, the more intense the design becomes, because you're very specific on what you're designing. Because you have more narrower vision, and so that's why we do the whole property design, a quick design, or not a quick design, but a general design. And so you just understand the basics of, this is the property, this is where the water is going to be flowing, this is where the sun is going to be going, things like that. And your zones are going to be. And then from there, when you break into those smaller chunks, that's when you get into the really nitty gritty of each small area.